Hello everyone, good evening. I'm Shreya Dhondial. You're watching Debrief. We are at a point of time where working from home is the most prudent thing to do right now. Saving yourself from the virus is the most prudent thing to do right now. And that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm back at home. I'm back at working from home. So I'm not in the studios today, but Debrief continues to bring you information that you require right now. Today we are talking about something that all of you have been talking about, plasma therapy. And we are talking about it because there are SOS calls that we are getting, SOSs on our social media platforms as well, that are desperately asking for plasma for their loved ones. Is plasma something that can make a difference between life and death? Does it really work? If it works, when does it work? And if it works, who does it really work on? All those questions, we'll try and get them answered on the show over the next 30 minutes. And it was important to talk about plasma therapy today because there's a lot of conflicting and confusing information that is coming to us from all sources. Private doctors say something, the government of India says something. So we'll try and clear all those doubts and try and clear all the myths around plasma therapy over the next 30 minutes. First, a quick look at what plasma therapy actually means. Social media and WhatsApp messages are once again inundated with SOS messages asking for plasma. Doctors scrambling to treat Covid-19 patients are using every trick in the book, including plasma therapy. But the million-dollar question is, does this therapy make any difference between life and death? The line of treatment involves extracting antibodies from COVID survivors and transfusing them into a sick patient. The plasma of a recovered healthy donor, ideally 14 to 28 days after being COVID negative, contains virus-fighting antibodies. The medical fraternity, however, is divided on whether or not to use plasma. The Indian Council of Medical Research has reiterated that plasma therapy does not work in severe or critical cases. Basically, it is of no use beyond 7 days of the onset of symptoms.
जो और ट्रीटमेंट है जो हम देते हैं एज इमरजेंसी यूज ऑथराइजेशन, उसमें रेमडेसिविर आती है, एक ड्रग है टॉसिजुलिमैब और तीसरा है कन्वलेसेंट प्लाज्मा. ये सिर्फ तभी दिए जाते हैं अगर हमें लगे कि पेशेंट ज़्यादा डिटेरियोरेट कर रहा है. बट जो हमारे मेन ट्रीटमेंट स्ट्रैटेजी हैं वो वही तीन है, ऑक्सीजन, स्टीरॉयड्स और एंटीकोगुलेंट्स. तो ये समझना बहुत ज़रूरी है कि अगर ये तीन चीज़ें मिल रही हैं पेशेंट को तो ही इज़ गेटिंग द राइट ट्रीटमेंट. और जो ट्रीटमेंट हैं जैसे रेमडेसिविर है, कन्वलेसेंट प्लाज्मा है जो कहते हैं प्लाज्मा, या फिर टॉसिजुलिमैब है, दीज आर ओनली अंडर इमरजेंसी यूज ऑथराइजेशन और इसमें कोई स्ट्रॉन्ग इतना डेटा नहीं है.
But plasma therapy has its advocates as well. Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal was an early one. He had inaugurated India's first plasma blood bank for COVID patients in July last year.
प्लाज्मा के जो ट्रायल किए गए दिल्ली में, ट्रायल के जो नतीजे आए, वो नतीजे ये दिखाते हैं कि प्लाज्मा से लोगों को कोरोना में मदद मिलती है. जो मॉडरेट पेशेंट हैं वो सीवियर होने से बचते हैं, उनकी स्थिति सुधर जाती है, मौत के ऊपर कंट्रोल करने में मदद मिलती है.
Countries like the US, Brazil, France, UK, China are all using the therapy to stem mortality rates. But the second wave in India has thrown open multiple challenges that have no conclusive solutions at this point of time. The Indian Council for Medical Research has pointed out that convalescent plasma therapy can only act as a catalyst in recovery but cannot be the only line of treatment. There is no clinical evidence that plasma therapy is 100% effective on patients experiencing lung collapse or other disorders. More importantly, a study conducted by the British journal Nature has indicated that plasma therapy could potentially lead to new variants that hoodwinks our immune system. With Swastika Das, I'm Shreya Dhondial. Let's try and understand plasma therapy a bit better. I'm being joined by doctors all of you know and all of you have seen on your television screens. Dr. Vishal Rao is a member of the task force of the Karnataka government, also a renowned oncologist. We have Dr. Raman Gangadkar. He's he was the chief epidemiologist of the ICMR. Monica Vadra is joining us. She's someone who is helping people get plasma here in Delhi. And we are being joined by Dr. Neil Pinto. He's the founder of Pint Network. Essentially, this is a website that matches that. You register there if you need plasma, and then plasma donors register there as well. And the website matches the donors and the person who requires the plasma. Dr. Vishal Rao, I'm coming to you first. You were one of the first advocates of plasma therapy in Karnataka. It's been a year now since the COVID epidemic. Can you tell us what your experience has shown, not just in research, but in clinical settings as well?
Thank you, Shreya. See, one of the early experiences we had, and when we actually went out to set up the plasma bank, there was a deep sense of need to look at what are the possible treatments that could combat the COVID infection. And one of the promising things that has been there for more than 100 years now, that has been spoken about, is convalescent plasma. The question was, does convalescent plasma be useful in COVID-19? And that is the question that is still not fully answered. The US FDA currently has given it an emergency extended usage approval. And Mayo Clinic is one of the front runners who has done about more than 1 lakh cases on it. Now, current data that is showing is that there are mixed results that are there. But if you look at anecdotal evidences for us from patients who are recovering from plasma therapy, are people who have been initiated it within the 3 days and who have very high antibody titers on this. So we did a small joint study with the Indian Institute of Science here at Bangalore with HCG, where we started looking at their neutralizing antibody titers. So what is very important to know is that if you start it early, and if you start it in patients when you give them with high antibody titers, in addition to all other treatments, you have a good chance of some recoveries. The data again is not completely like a verdict, but there are conjectures like what we are talking about now, which are saying that there are new strains that could be coming out, but that could come out with any such treatment that is combating the virus today. But in plasma, it is more of an orphan drug because there is no pharma backing. This has got no marketing. So it is supposed to be run and it is not widely available. So at this juncture, we are at a very complex situation where on one hand, we are trying to combat evidence, and we as scientists, as clinical evidence-based practitioners would definitely want to look at evidence. But at the same time, we cannot sit at a point when we say that remdesivir doesn't work, plasma is useless, oxygen is not there, beds are not there, and doctors should work from home. We have to make our effort, and that is what every medical fraternity is trying to do in order to save lives. And naturally, medical evidence is very crucial. So we are in touch with international bodies. We are in touch with the Mayo Clinic team. We are writing to people, looking at what time. And we are also trying to look at touching base with USFD and others to understand what is the global consensus on this and where do we draw the line. But as the evidence is evolving, we are putting our best foot forward to see that patient lives are saved. And for us, there is nothing more important than that at this juncture.
I agree with you, Dr. Vishal Rao, because there are conflicting studies and evidence on almost everything that we are using on COVID right now, whether it's remdesivir, whether it's Tamiflu, whether it's hydroxychloroquine. I mean, if there is one study that's saying it works, there are 2 studies that say it doesn't work. So what does a doctor do? You know, he has to use whatever tools available to him to try and save a patient's life. I understand that, and I understand what you're trying to say. But Dr. Raman Ganga Ketkar, as someone who's been with the ICMR, here's the question. The ICMR had done a study on plasma therapy as well. What has that study found? Has that study found that there is some evidence that it might work in some cases and therefore is worth a shot? Or has the study completely dismissed plasma therapy as something that doesn't work on COVID?
The Placid trial that was done is a randomized control trial. So it belongs to a different class where some robust evidence can always be generated. Now, when this particular study was done, there is one thing which happened, that they found in the study that there is no effect of provision of convalescent plasma. However, it was also realized that the titers of antibodies were done post facto. After conduct of the trial, it was not done on real-time basis. So whatever convalescent plasma that was being used was not of a so-called high titer antibodies. And it was felt when you go for subgroup analysis though the evidence was not robust, that will these high titer antibodies work, was an issue which was left as a question mark. We did not have statistical significance,
Acha.
mainly because the sample size itself was very small. So one of the things which we have to realize is
So, Dr. Ganga
convalescent plasma.
Khetkar, then therefore the question that if the ICMR study was inconclusive or found to a large extent that plasma therapy wasn't working on COVID patients, especially not on those patients who had crossed day 6 or 7 of the virus, why is it still part of the Government of India's protocol? It still remains there, which is why doctors are using it.
No, I think part of it tends to lie with some of the issues which Dr. Rao has already elucidated, that there is hardly anything that you can provide. Convalescent plasma is actually used in almost all diseases, whether it was, even in HIV, initially they used it for passive infusions as such, thinking that it would be useful. Actually, it is an indicator that you don't have an effective drug or an intervention that could perhaps get rid of this particular infection. Now, one of the reasons why perhaps it has stayed is there is an observational study that was done in US, and it was a large enough study, about 35,000 odd people. US FDA allowed it for as an emergency use authorization to begin with, and this observational study was conducted among those who were receiving this convalescent plasma. Now, in that study, they found that if you are provided with uh, convalescent plasma early enough, and definitely less than 7 days time, preferably between up to 3 days, the things may be different. There may be a small significance that may come. But one must also remember that this is an observational study, so you have not randomized, so there could be different biases that tend to arise. So one needs to be little careful when we tend to draw conclusions of the same. Though one of the issues that they talked of was we could provide high titers of antibody. But for one issue that I always worry about, if you look at the monoclonals which have also been developed in US, there are 4 different monoclonals which actually are purified neutralizing antibodies which are able to bind this virus effectively and neutralize that virus. Now, even in them, you are finding that variants that are emerging are not able to. These monoclonal antibodies are losing their efficacy on the same, and this has to be provided among people who are only having mild disease between first 2 to 3 days time. Whereas you look at this convalescent plasma, even that observational study says it is of very little use if the patient has moderate to severe illness, if he is ventilated. No, so essentially there is lot of confusion, and perhaps that tends to stay in the guidelines.
I agree. There is confusion, and that confusion is also reflected in the ICMR protocols that have been put out, the Government of India protocols to treat COVID-19. Dr. Ganga Khetkar, I believe you do have to join another channel for another show. So I'll thank you here. Thank you very much for joining us and giving us your time. Dr. Vishal Rao, then I want to ask you if there are conflicting studies about plasma therapy, if there is confusion around plasma therapy, why is almost every doctor recommending it for patients who are in ICU? And this program, I have to tell you and our viewers, was triggered by the fact that we have a young colleague in office whose father is in ICU, whose father is critical, and the doctor has asked her to look for plasma, and she's been knocking at every door she can trying to arrange for this plasma. In a case like this, in cases where people are in ICU or are severe or their illness has crossed 7 to 8 days, can it become a matter of life and death?
No, absolutely no. But what's important here to understand is that the earlier it is started, and that's what we've been emphatic, and most studies have been showing direction for that, within 3 days of your oxygen requirement, if you're able to give plasma which is high in antibody titers, its efficacy is most useful and can be attempted. But again, it is not a life and death situation, and if you try to use it in patients who are on ventilator, where you are trying to be desperate at the last moment, this is not going to work. So while we have to be scientific, and it's very, very important not to create a mockery of the science, but definitely to make a sincere, honest attempt. So giving you an example, I had a senior doctor who was in the hospital, who was admitted, who was serious, whom remdesivir was not working, and he was shifted into the ICU, and at which time we've given plasma, and the next day he started to recover. And this gentleman today is a testimony to tell me that next day when I started recovering, I started feeling better. In 3 days I was back in the ward and I didn't get intubated. So these are the kind of stories that I get to hear from doctors, forget about things, who tell me that, look, let us try it for people early. Now, when I hear this, if it was my own relative, my own mother or my father, would I attempt it? Yes, my answer is definitely yes, because I would want to give a genuine attempt to save their life. But it has to be backed with science, and naturally, science is something that collectively, globally, we are working to together. But till the time that the science is not giving a verdict, we need to make sincere attempts in humanitarian grounds, and that is what the US FDA with Mayo Clinic is today allowing for more than 1 lakh patients to make an attempt. So what I'm worried about is there should be no indiscriminate wrong usage of it, but at the same time we need to make an honest attempt to save lives. That is what doctors are here for, to maintain science. Now this is a place where we need to balance science, and all our efforts should be in this direction, is what I would want to present before.
Okay. Okay, Dr. Rao, I think you make your point well. I'm now going to talk to people who are trying and arranging plasma for people. Dr. Neil Pinto, if I can come to you. The fact is that we are often told that India has the highest number of recoveries anywhere in the world. We have about 1,60,000 people, almost 1.5 crore people who have recovered from COVID-19, which means we have the amount of plasma that is needed for people. It's available. Then why are people running from door to door, knocking at every door to get plasma? Why is there a shortage of plasma?
We see a huge hesitancy among the recovered patients when it comes to donation. There are a couple of reasons for this. So one is recovered patients are worried about going back to a hospital. They are worried about getting reinfected. However, they are the people who actually have the antibodies. And secondly, most of the blood banks and hospitals are away from the COVID wards. So there's nothing to fear while going back to a hospital. So that's one of the reasons. The second is people worry that plasma donation is painful, similar to blood donation. However, plasma donation is less painful, and also it doesn't cause any fatigue because the red blood cells are returned back to your body and you don't lose any red blood cells. Thirdly, something I've heard a lot is people worry that if they donate plasma, they won't have any plasma to donate for if their family members get infected. This is something I've heard across cities. But what I do want to say is that one can donate plasma every 14 days as per the current guidelines. So there's no worry about not being able to donate plasma in the future. And the last myth that I've heard is, of course, what we spoke about for the past 15 minutes, which is plasma therapy is not effective. Unfortunately, until we have more robust clinical data, doctors continue to use it across mild to moderate patients as well as severe patients, along with a bunch of other treatments. And until we have that data, I think it will be continue to be used. So we shouldn't worry about whether it's effective or not. We should just make it as easy as possible for the frontliners and make the resource available to them.
Okay. And Monica, you are someone I know who's been very active on Twitter trying to arrange plasma for people. What are the sort of desperate calls that you get? How many calls do you get? And how are you managing it? Because I believe last minute, a lot of people commit to giving plasma and then back out for some reason. What are some of the issues that you are dealing with?
So on an average, every day I receive a minimum of, and this is quite honest, between my office, online, on social media, or on my personal number, about 100 to 150 requests for plasma donation. We have a system that has been set up now because the unfortunate issue we have, which all the esteemed panelists and doctors mentioned, is a shortage of plasma. So it's a little bit of a struggle to be able to arrange plasma for as many people as we can, but we do our best. There are doctors calling up at times as well, requesting if we can arrange plasma for patients who are on ventilators. I'm not a medical professional, but when I connect them to plasma banks, the reply I get back to the banks usually is that plasma therapy is ineffective. If you're severely critical, you're on a ventilator because the virus, the efficacy of the virus is so high in your body that plasma therapy doesn't work. So it's very difficult to convey that back to patients, their families, or even our frontline workers. But I try to do as much as I can to help people on a day-to-day basis.
Monica, we need more people like you. Thank you very much for doing what you're doing. I'm going to thank Dr. Pinto for joining us. Dr. Vishal Rao, thank you very much for joining us as well. I hope this session has been newsworthy. I hope it has been instructive, because there are a lot of myths and confusion around plasma therapy, which we needed to clear. The confusion still remains. There is no definitive yes or no on whether plasma therapy is working or not, but at least the information that is available out there is now available to you as well. A quick break. Up next, Prime Minister Modi reviewing the efforts that the Indian Navy is making to bring back oxygen from friendly countries. That's coming up in just a bit. Do stay with us. Welcome back. Some pictures coming to us now. Take a look at them. This is Prime Minister Narendra Modi meeting the Chief of Naval Staff to just review what all the efforts the Navy has been making for the last many days, at least for the last 10 days, to ease the oxygen crisis in India. What the Navy has done is this over the last many days. Of course, as you know, naval ships, warships have been deployed to carry back oxygen from the Middle East. For example, a ship has already reached Mumbai carrying oxygen, liquid oxygen from Bahrain. Then what you also have is the Navy opening up its field hospitals to civilians, and very importantly, carrying oxygen and carrying other medical equipment to far off places like the Lakshadweep Island or the Andaman and Nicobar Island. This of course comes in a series of meetings that the Prime Minister has been doing. It started with the PM meeting the CDS, then he met the Army Chief, the Air Chief, and now finally the Indian Navy Chief, who was briefing him, who's briefed him today about the efforts that the Indian Navy is making. As we leave you with something which may make you feel good. I don't know if this is the time for any one of us to feel good, seeing so much death and disease around us. But these are pictures, and this is a report that is coming to us from France, where the centuries-old cathedral Notre Dame was consumed by fire a year ago. It's now open to the public. Not too many people turning up because of Covid-19, but it's now open. We are leaving you with this report. Thanks very much for watching.
Its vaulted ceilings, stained glass windows and elaborate columns. As you can see on these images shot by CNN, so much of what makes Notre Dame one of the world's most exquisite Gothic wonders stands tall, almost miraculously. The construction of the cathedral may have taken 182 years from when it began in 1163. It took the fire of 2019 a matter of hours to compromise its stability. The work of the last 2 years has been all about ensuring that the cathedral stayed upright.
We have to be sure that the structure is solid. So I have to take a lot of measures to consolidate. We don't want to make reconstruction without being reassured.
Here you can see the iconic North Tower that at one point had been threatened by the flames on the night of the fire. In the end, they were put out before it could collapse. But this was where the most devastating part of the fire took place. It was here that the famous Notre Dame spire once stood.
As the world watched, the spire, which had been under renovation, collapsed, breaking through the vaulted ceiling, which then crashed into the nave. The scaffolding that had surrounded it, 40,000 tubes of metal now twisted into the structure, then had to be carefully picked through and removed. General Jean-Louis Georgelin, who's in charge of the renovations, gave CNN a rare tour.
This is a place where the spire collapsed. You know, this is the center of a drama.
The general then shows us the exact spot where the spire first came crashing through. Here, the vaulted ceiling is held up by wooden pillars, each weighing 1.5 tons. They ensure, explains the project manager, that if the stones give way for whatever reason, bad weather, a tremor, a shock, well, the wooden support beams will keep the structure standing. Now that the scaffolding for the renovations is ready, General Georgelin says that the work of rebuilding Notre Dame's vaulted ceiling and its spire will begin before the end of the year.
This is the central part of the nave where the great majority of the reconstruction is going to have to take place, since it's here that the spire collapsed, bringing down the stone structure with it. Elsewhere, what's really remarkable is how intact the structure is. These stones that had stood for more than 8 centuries, almost exactly as they were.
Outside too, the cathedral's iconic Gothic facade stands as a testament to a construction that has proven as sturdy as it is delicate. Cathedral officials say that almost $1 billion have been raised through donations from 150 countries so far. A reminder of the place that Notre Dame has, not just in the history of France, but in the hearts of so many all around the world. Melissa Bell, CNN, Paris.